Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today we start this Yoma daf Samach Hey. We are going to begin on Samach Hey with Aleph, about 6 lines from the top. It's not. We learned at our Mishnah, Behuda Omer, he says that Tomus, that we have to allow the other Sa'ir to die. Now Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, we can understand according to the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan, which we said before. There was a machlokas whether we say Bali Chaim Nidchim, that once the first pair, one of them died, so the other one from that first pair, since it's not fit to be used because it was nira b'nidcha, so then we say, even though it's alive, balichaim nidchim, and therefore the second pair, when you do a new hagrala, you use the second pair, you cannot use the first one. So I can understand that sheet that Rabbi Yochanan Never Sheni Shibazug Rishon Yiret, he says that the first pair, the second one from the first pair, we don't use it, rather we allow it to graze and develop a mum, and then we use its proceeds as an olah. Rabbi Yehuda Yomos, and according to the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, he says that it should be killed, it should die, since according to the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, Bali Chaim Nidchim. Therefore, Mischaper b'sheni shebazug sheni, you could achieve kapara by using the second one in the second grouping. El Rab Sheni Shibazug Sheni Yira. He says the second of the second pair, that's the one that is grazed. However, the first one is apparently allowed to be used. Rabbi Yehuda Yomus, Rabbi Yehuda B'may Mechaper. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he says the first one has to die. So if the second animal in the second group has to graze, because you can't use that, and the first one, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is not allowed to be used, rather it's killed, so then you're obviously not able to do the achieve kapara. So there's, in this case, there's no Sol Hashem. So the first one can't be used because he holds Balakam Nidchin. He says the second one can't be used either. And Gemara says, no, Mi Savar Rabbi Yehuda Asheni Shibazug Sheni Koi. Rabbi Yehuda Asheni Shibazug Rishon Koi. He was only talking about the first one. The first one goes Lamisa, not only that one goes Lamisa. However, when it comes to the second one, he holds it can still be used, and therefore you can achieve kapara by the second hagrala by the use of both those animals. Some ask a little bit differently. Rabbi Yehuda says nishbach adam. If let's say the blood of Sir Hashem spills, then yomus hamashtalech. So you have to allow the other one, the azazel, has to die. Now, Mesa Mishtalech, and also if the Mishtalech is the one that dies, Yishavach Adam, you have to spill the blood. Now, Bishlam Rav, I can understand according to Rav, Reisha Pligi B'chata Sibor. The Reisha is arguing about a Chata Sibor. The Sefer Pligi B'Bali Chayim. Now, Rabbi Yochanan, my Ode. What exactly is he really adding on? Doesn't seem to be adding on to anything. Kash, and therefore, according to that, it is indeed a difficulty. Let's now continue with the next piece of Gemara. So he said that you have to do an entire new lottery, and therefore, in the event that the blood was spilled before you did the proper zrikas, the proper applications in the lifnai lifnim, etc., so then the mishtalech has to die. That makes sense. That you didn't do the mitzvah since the matanos mitnim weren't done. So since the mitzvah wasn't performed, it would make sense that that's not acceptable, and therefore you have to also allow the shtalech to die. Why, in the case where the azazel died, why do you have to spill the blood? You're doing the mitzvah, doing everything right. So why would you have to spill the blood? So the pasuk says, how long does the azazel still need to be alive? It has to still be alive during the time of the matan damim, and therefore, in the event that it died before the blood was properly applied completely, so therefore the din is that yishafech adam, the blood is spilled. Tanan Hasan. So we learn the mistake to shton. So you have people that sent their shekel, their matzah shekel, which was done during Chodesh Adar, so that they would have communal funds for the Karbanos Sibor starting from the new month of Nisan for the whole year. And unfortunately, along the way, either these monies were lost or stolen, so it depends. Even if let's say already the Truma Salishka was already separated, then Nishboin Gizbarim, all is necessary is for them to make a shvua to the Gizbarim that they were not engaged in any negative act, and then they're no longer responsible for it, as well as the Baal. Otherwise, if let's say the Trumas Alishka was not yet performed, and therefore the Beis HaMikdash was not koinit because they didn't really do anything yet, so what they have to do is they have to make a shvua to the Bnei Ir, who they borrowed, they did this shlichus for, saying that they were not engaged in any foul play. Bnei Ir shaytan achrayim tachteim. Unfortunately, the Bnei Ir will have to give another new shekel. Now, what happens now? Nimso'o shechzirim haganavim. So what happens if, let's say, you found those original coins? So now you have two coins in play. It was lost and stolen, but it was before the Trumas Alishka was separated. So therefore, because of that, you have to give a second one. So now they have to give a second one. What do you do now that the first one's recovered? So the Gemara says, both of them are considered to be shkolim. However, he says that it cannot be used for the next year. Says Rashi all the way at the bottom. It's not oil for the Baal. Even though he gave two, so you should say, okay, so I should be covered for this year and for next year. No. He has to give again. It doesn't count for next year. Rabbi Yehuda says this great chiddush that no, actually since you gave shekel and another one, so therefore they should count for this year and for next year's. So my time Rabbi Yehuda, so Rabbi Yehuda, when it comes to a choy for this year, you can prepay and use it for the next year. Which again is a great chiddush. Now, Abai. So based on this shita of Rabbi Yehuda, we now have a question. Let's say again on Yom Kippur you have a par, you have a sire, and let's say she'abdu. Let's say they got lost, and you replace them with other animals, or for that matter, the chein seiri avodah zara. When it comes to the Klal Yisrael, it's an Isaac avodah zara, and when they do the Vera avodah zara, so they have to bring a seir avodah zara. She'abdu. Let's say got lost. So the same scenario, got lost, and they put another one in instead. Kulan Yimusu. The din is, all of them die. Says Rashi, we don't say, like the Shita of Yehuda, that you can use it for the following year. No, you can't. And here's the punchline. Dibra Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says it. So the question, how come when it comes to the shekel, Rabbi Yehuda says it's allowed to be used, but when it comes to karbanos, not? It seems to be, if it works by the shekel, you can use a chayiv l'shana haba. You should also be able to use this l'shana haba. So that's going to be the question. Rather, what you should do is you should allow it to graze and let it get a mum. He says no. When it comes to chatas sibor, it doesn't die. Only when it comes to chatas yachin. When it comes to karban yachin, that's when we say that it's mesa, but not by karban sibor. So again, still we have a question. So again, what do we say? Well, you should say keep the seer for next year. Don't kill it. But we clearly say Rabbi Yehuda holds by the seer Yomi Kippurim. You cannot be used for next year. So maybe so too when it comes to shkolim. So on this Amalei, on this the Gemara answers as we continue to Samachay Amid phase. And we're not really going to get to an answer until really tomorrow's daf, but I'll conclude with just a sneak peek of what the teretz will end up being. Maskana, Karbanos Sibur Ka'amrit. How could you compare shkolim that you could use the Shana Haba to Karbanos? Shana Karbanos Sibor, focusing on the word Sibor, could a Rebbe Tabi, Rabbi Yishiyam, Rabbi Tabi, Rabbi Yishiyam, Kra. The pasuk says, Zos Os Chodesh B'Chadshay, that it has to be for that year. So in other words, we know that it's only from Rosh Chodesh Nisan and onward, and you can't bring from the one from last year or for next year. It doesn't work for karbanos. So the whole purpose of these monies again is for karban sibor. So when it comes to the carbon seaboard, it cannot be bought. You cannot use it for other things. So hatenach sawyer. I can understand we're talking about the sawyer, which is for public funds. However, par Michael Maymar. How about when it comes to the par? It comes from the Kohen Gadol, not from public funds. So that's one question. Gzer par to sawyer. You're right. Really, it shouldn't be an issue when it comes to the par, because it's not a carbon seaboard, it's a carbon yochid. So this din should only apply to the monies that are collected for a carbon seaboard, but not when it comes to a par. But we make gzer atu because if we allow it by a par, you may make a mistake by a sawyer. Mishum gzer yamusu, because of gzer we're going to allow it to die. That seems a little bit extreme. Vote furthermore, had the Rabbi Taviyam and Rabbi Yeshai gufa mitzvah. He says it's gufa a mitzvah, not ma'akev. It's not equal. Yom Rabbi Yehuda or Shmuel, Karbanos Sibor Haboyim Be'echem Nisan. If let's say you have a carbon Sibor that comes on the first of Nisan, and here's the key word, mitzvah it's a mitzvah, it's preferable, it's the right thing to do, it's better to do and take from the new one. However, if you brought from the old one, yatsa. So it's not really true. El Shechisu mitzvah. You just missed out on the mitzvah, but it's not le'ikim. So how can you tell me you're going to kill this animal because of it? Because of a gzera parat the sire? It's hard to understand. El Omer Reb Zeri says a different shot. Again, why do when it comes to the shkolim, as we do to say you can use the lishon haba, but when it comes to the karbanos on Yom Kippur, we don't allow it to be used the following year. Because when you did the lottery, it only works for that year. It will not work for the following year. And therefore, as a little bit of a technical issue, that's the reason why you cannot use these karbanos for the following year, because the hagrala was chal only for that Yom Kippur. So v'nesi v'nagro, so do another hagrala the next year. What's the problem? Maybe a person is going to say that the girl really works 1 year to the next. In other words, it's shaykh that a person will think that you don't need to do a hagral, and you'll end up making a mistake because you really need to, and therefore maybe that's the whole issue. So 1 second. Hatin sire. Again, I understand when it comes to the sire parmai to meimar. Again, it's not a carbon seaboard. Gzer part to sire. So again, the Gemara asks the same question. Mishum gzer yumusu, because if gzer are going to kill this animal. It says it's a different issue. The issue is when it comes to a carbon chatas, in which if the owner, namely the Kohen Gadol, dies, in that situation it's a problem. Because we know when it comes to a carbon yachid, if it's a chatas, that mesa ba'aleha, that yamusu. So therefore, because we're concerned that this Kohen Gadol may have died in the interim, because of that we don't want you to use this carbon for the future. So interesting enough, here we flip it. Gzer to par. Here we're concerned because the only time there's a carbon yachid is daf when it comes to the par. So therefore we say that we're goyes to the sar because we're concerned of the par. Again, same question. Mishum gzer yimusu. So we're going to kill it because of gzera. The issue is that it may be the following year. We know that when it comes to the par for Yom Kippur, it must be less than a year old. So we have a problem that we know that that animal has to at least be 8 days old. So after another year, 355 days, whatever, so you've basically gone over a year. That animal cannot be used. It's a practical issue. It's a technical issue, but it's a true issue that you can't use this par for the following year. So where it says gezerah, he gufa chata she'aver shenasahi. What do you mean it's a gezerah? It's geferish if it's over a year. Why are you saying it's a gezerah? It's not a gezerah. It's mamish against halacha. You can't use it. Halukasha. Maybe it's takiz only gezerah. What do you mean? It's over a year old? Not necessarily. What do you mean not necessarily? From one Yom Kippur to the next Yom Kippur, it's not a year old? Not really. Because it depends on the following maflokus. Kirebi, Desani, when it comes to Bati Irichayma, you have a year to be able to redeem your property. Now, how long is a year? What do you mean how long is a year? Lunar calendar, solar calendar, that's the point. Shana Tamima minus Shosh Meos Shisha Lachamisha Yoim Kamini Mosacham. Divu Rabbi. So Rabbi says that you count 365 days. Now, if you think about it, that means what? According to Rabbi, if the animal, let's say on the first Yom Kippur, is 8 days old, which is the acceptable age, can't be before that, but once it's, because otherwise it's mechusar zman. Before that is not acceptable, but 8 days, yes. Now, Yom Kippur is going to come, let's say it's not another, there's only one Adar that year, 355 days. So 355 plus 8 is less than 365 days. So therefore it's shaykh that you can actually have a par that lived through one Yom Kippur and a second Yom Kippur and still be less than a year old. But because of the gezerah, we'll say you can't use it. Says no, it's got to be used after 12 months, and therefore according to the Chachamim, it's not a gezerah, it definitely cannot be used. As we continue Samach Vav Modal, the im nisabra l'moicher. And when it comes to Bati Rechaima, if there's a leap year, that leap year is in favor of the moicher, the one who sold it, and therefore again it has to do with whether or not you have 12 months or 13 months. So the moicher, the one who sells it, again has the right to buy it back within a year's time. Now, again, hatinach sayir, I can understand this whole issue is by a sayir. Par ma'ikla meimar. What are you going to say about a par? Says Rashi, shehu ben shalosh. So I actually said it wrong. That the whole issue of an animal is dafka when it comes to a sayir. The sayir has to be less than a year old. But a par, the very nature of a par, is a grown-up big animal, which is 3 years old. So it's 3 years older, so next year doesn't matter. So what's the problem? I can understand the sayir is an issue because the sayir has to be less than a year old. However, the par doesn't have to be less than a year old. It has to be older. It has to be 3 years or older. It says Rashi, Shu ben Shalish. So Gezer par to sayir. Mishum Gezer Yomus. Again, because of Gezer going to die, you're going to kill it. Both. Chata Shavar Shnasa. The truth is, if you have a chatas in which it's year past, we don't kill it. We say that it goes to graze. We hold that it should graze. It doesn't get killed. We're going to stop with this line. We're going to discuss this at much greater length. The whole issue is takala. That what may happen? You may end up having this. Maybe you're right. Maybe you could use this animal for the following year. You can use the par another year. It's no big deal. But the problem is, if you allow this par from Yom Kippur to be used the following year, okay, it's fine. You could use it for the following year. But what happens during the days between Yom Kippur 1 and Yom Kippur 2? One may end up bringing this animal for a different carbon throughout the whole year. They may end up using it for something else. Because of takala, that is the issue why Rabbi Yehuda says it cannot be used with Shana Haba. However, when it comes to Shkolim, it's not an issue. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's see a couple questions. Question 1. Heichem etzinu Rabbi Yehuda. How do we find Rabbi Yehuda in the Saber Chovash Shel Shana Zu, Karibus Shel Shana Haba? That if it's used for this year, it can be used for the following year. So we said when it comes to the Shkolim, if they were lost, you're mafresh other coins in their stead, and all of a sudden they're found. So we say, Rabbi Yehuda holds that's oil in the Shana Haba. You can use it this year, and you prepay for next year. And then the question continues. And the Rabbi says, we're concerned that you may end up using it for something else other than this purpose, and therefore that is the issue. TA 18. If you have the Sa'ir of Yom Kippur, She'avad B'Hifra Shachar Tachtav, Ne'im Kosher Min HaTayru L'Shana Ba, Uvamaz Zet Talui. Are you allowed to use it the following year? And was it Talui? So he says, Ma'chokas Tanoim, Rebbe and Rabbanan, if you could, if you count 12 months, and therefore it would be an issue, because then it was already the second Yom Kippur, and it's more than a year old. If it 365 days, then it is kosher, and only because of takala we say that it is an issue. That was TA 18. TA 18 again is totally on this machlokus Rebbe and the Chachamim by the Bati Rechaima what the din is. So too when it comes to the din of the Sa'ir Shel Yom Kippurim. So that's the question, it says by a Sa'ir. Because again, a par is more than 3 years old. The Sa'ir is less than a year old. Okay, I'm glad I made that correction. Lastly, TB21. Be'eza Indian Maisa B'Gemara, Denechlu Tanoim Yichashin L'Takala Olal. Where do we find that there's machlokas whether or not we have an issue, we accept a kala, is that a valid issue? This is 21, and he says, by Pesach, Carbon Pesach, etc., which we didn't really do, but we're going to end up seeing it's going to be the same idea when it comes to a par and Pesach, has to be less than a year old, whether or not, what exactly the din is of the kala, that it may be used for other purposes. Ad kan.